Hello and welcome to another Meta Chronicle, the series in which we try to track the major teams of the Dice Masters Meta. Since the rotation of 2022, we've had one chronicle with Spug about his Turbo Barry team, and now we have the other major team of the meta, and to talk about it, we have US champ, Worlds finalist, and all-round good guy, Dana Patton. Hello, Dana.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me.
And you are here with your less than nice Master Mold team, in fact.
Yeah, Master Mold's he's a tough guy for sure.
He's a bit overwhelming. You took him to just very recently to the top of American Nats, and you took him to the final of Worlds. And during all of those games, how many did you lose?
I think I went 20 wins, 3 losses, and it's just a little
Okay.
unfortunate. 2 of those 3 came in the finals against Laureate, who played quite well.
Still, pretty good record. So, what we're going to do is talk a little bit about the inspiration for the team and how you put it together, why you chose the cards that you did. Then we'll talk about your 3-turn theory, or perhaps it's 2-turn theory with Master Mold, and then something about how you deal with counters in the meta or threats that might be presented to you. Then a little bit about the mirror match, and finally what you would change on the team. I would like to take the opportunity to point out that this is the Dice Coalition Team Builder. It's brilliant, and do use it. I mean, I'm just going to be searching for stuff today, but you can do some clever stuff with it, so do check it out. Anyway, that's my job. Dana, over to you.
Sounds good. So I actually, when preparing for the tournament, I actually didn't start with Master Mold at all. So just to throw you off with the team builder right from the beginning, I actually started trying to build a super rare Thor team. That's where some of my previous success came from. And what I wanted to do in some of my playtesting early on was I wanted to build what I thought would be a strong team that we knew would exist within the meta. Master Mold has gotten a lot of coverage since it was originally previewed, I think even maybe a couple years ago, at some point during the pandemic. When it first came out, it had a big splash, giant character with giant stats that could pop out a huge amount of tokens every turn. So I built a very quick framework of a Master Mold team and used that as my benchmark. And all the teams that I was trying to develop, I would play against that Master Mold team. And what I quickly found out is that I would lose every time. So it was one of those things where I abandoned my initial plan and I took the old if you can't beat them, join them approach, and decided to focus on Master Mold in a little bit more seriousness and started to develop the team from there.
So tell us about the team itself. I'm going to switch over to that screen now.
Sure. So the team, I guess, could be separated into 3 big categories: the win conditions, the ramp. There's a lot of ramp, and then some of the support pieces. So the big card, of course, is Master Mold. Like I said before, giant stats. But beyond that, I think the really impressive ability is just how many tokens it can shove out. So when it's fielded, when it attacks, and then when it KOs, a 5/5 token comes out. So every turn you can get up to a maximum of 3 tokens, and it's not hard to do that. So if you're chucking out 3 5/5 tokens every turn, it's not hard to see why that can be pretty overwhelming pretty quickly.
No. Okay, so Master Mold is one part of the win con, and what is the other part?
The other part is Villainous Pact. It's often overlooked, not only in this case providing some ramp, but also as a secondary win condition. Yeah, in this particular meta, it's not particularly hard to get a bunch of sidekicks or blockers in the field, especially with cards like Mr. Sinister. It's not hard to get a bunch of sidekicks in the field or maintain a bunch of sidekicks in the field. So even though a bunch of 5/5 tokens is scary, you do often need to find a secondary way to push them through for damage. So I decided to go with Villainous Pact for that. Basically, when you play Villainous Pact and you have a bunch of tokens in the field, they're often only able to block with 1 or maybe sometimes 2 or 3 characters, and you're able to plow through for 20 damage all at once.
Nice. Scary. Okay, so that's your win con.
Yeah, and like you said, ramping is a big deal for this because 6 is not a small cost for a win condition that you want to have consistently. So the team has quite a bit of ramp on it. We have Villainous Pact, like I mentioned, for prep. There's the Wolverine, mainly there for the global for prep as well. We have Mr. Sinister that does both prep and churn to make sure that not only you're getting to your Master Mold, but you're able to cycle them through quite quickly. And then last but not least, the Dark Phoenix Global as well for discounting. So all those kind of 4 combined allow you to purchase Master Mold on turn 2 and ideally field it on turn 3. And then we can probably talk about that when we get to the turn 3 theory portion.
Okie dokie. And so we've done ramp, we've done win con, and Then the other stuff, the utility and control, I suppose.
Yeah, so there's a couple of pieces there. I think two of the most important ones are the Slinger's basic action, which again is this just there for the global. Force attack is very prevalent in Modern right now. It's very strong without static field to counter it. So it's there if you have some annoying control in the field of your opponent, you can force it to attack, either letting it through for damage or just block with a Master Mold and KO it. But it's also really useful to force attack some of their sidekicks out of the field as well, to thin their field and having an increased chance of making sure that your tokens can go through for damage.
That it shares with Barry's team, in fact. I think Spug was talking about that.
Yeah, and sometimes even useful in that Barry matchup too. If the Barry player finds that they're a little bit unlucky and they don't have a lot in the field and they only have the Barry, it can often be a good idea to force Barry out just to make sure that it starts to rotate through the bag.
Yep.
The other really important card on this team is the super rare Robin. And again, this is kind of a theme of the team, mainly there for the global. It is very good removal in and of itself, which I think is what makes it so strong. It's not uncommon to have a huge amount of characters in your field. So having a card that can kind of be used to ping out anything on the opposing team as spot removal is very strong. But the main thing there is to make sure that you are not paying outrageous fielding costs for your Master Mold. Ideally, you're going to be playing it, KOing it, and playing it every single turn. So it essentially takes Master Mold's fielding cost from 1, 2, 3 to 1, 1, 1, which is much more affordable. So,
out of curiosity, how many times did you actually use it as removal?
None, not a single time.
None at all. Okay. In theory, you could.
But theoretically, it's great removal. Yeah. From there, the team has a couple of flex spots. I'd say everything else on the team so far is not necessarily mandatory, but pretty close to being mandatory to make the team function as it is. But the 3 remaining support cards are a little bit more flex pieces that you can use to counter some of the things that you would be expecting to play within the meta. So one of the first things I put on there was the Mr. Mind, the rare Mr. Mind, which is there primarily to play against the Barry matchup. It basically allows you to copy a win attacks ability, which Barry has. So if your opponent is not careful and they decide to keep Barry in the field, you essentially have a 2-cost Barry Allen on your team, which is great.
There's nothing at all threatening about 7 tokens each getting +6.
Exactly.
Nice.
So and if they don't keep it in the field, they have to KO it, and they may not re-roll it back, and then it's getting stuck in their bag again. So you kind of win either way in that one. And it is secondarily being a villain isn't of itself quite useful as well. In case someone decides to use Villainous Pact against you, it gives you an additional potential blocker.
Again, how many times did that really come in handy?
Against Villainous Pact?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, not particularly useful there. I didn't.
But in theory.
Yeah, in theory. I did in playtesting purchase that die quite a bit against Barry, but in the tournament themselves, I didn't play against the Barry Allen team, so it was just sitting on the team looking pretty.
Because there were not many Barrys, right? Okay.
No. One of the other cards I had on the team was the rare Starro. I was looking for a bit of a flexible piece of control to have on the team. I wasn't entirely sure, since this was one of the first major tournaments in this meta, what to expect from my opponents. And I assumed there would be some surprising teams that I hadn't considered. So I wanted something that was relatively useful in any particular matchup. And Starro being able to steal whatever is most threatening on your opponent's side of the board and give it to you for a turn is quite strong. In playtesting, they did particularly well against super rare Thor teams, because otherwise nothing else on my team has a great way of favorably interacting with a super rare Thor team. So being able to steal Thor, field a Master Mold, and 3 tokens is an automatic 8 damage, in addition to having a whole bunch of tokens, Master Mold, and their Thor swinging across the field. So it really, again, puts your opponent in a difficult situation where they're likely not able to keep their win condition in the field, and they're going to have to KO themselves.
Yeah. Okay. And we have one more, the man himself.
Yeah, last but not least, the surprise all-star of the team, the rare Deken. Definitely, I think, the most powerful support card on the team, and definitely came in super, super handy in almost all of my matches. This is a card that you only really want to buy just before you're about to lose, and it sits there in the use pile and make sure that you're not able to take more than 7 damage in a turn. And in this particular meta where everyone is trying to swing through with upwards of 20 or more damage in a single turn, it's extremely strong against Barry teams, and extremely strong in the mirror match as well against other Master Mold teams, and can really be the difference between being about to lose and giving yourself another few turns to eke out a win.
Fantastic. Okay, so that's the team. Okay, so you sit down at the table. you're rolling dice. What do you buy? What do you do your first few turns?
Yeah, so this meta is a little bit strange in that all of the normal rules of the first 3 turns just go flying out the window. And instead of buying perhaps a 2-cost character on your first turn, on the first turn you're going to be looking to prep, which is a little silly, but it is one of the best ways of getting to some of these big characters right now. So either using the Dark Phoenix, or either using the Villainous Pact or the Wolverine Global on the first turn, saving 2 of any other energy, and using Mr. Sinister on your opponent's turn. That'll give you 1 sidekick in the field and rolling 6 sidekicks on your second turn. That gives you enough energy to prep that last die out of your bag, KO the sidekick in the field with the Dark Phoenix Global, and purchase a Master Mold for 4.
And this is going first with 3 dice.
This is going first, yeah. And that'll give you a 4 out of 7 chance of drawing Master Mold on turn 3.
Which, yeah. And if it doesn't come out then, it'll just come out the next turn, and it's horrible.
Yeah. And if you're going second, the plan is mostly the same. The only difference being that you're prepping twice on the first turn. So using both Villainous Pact and Wolverine on the first turn. And again, saving 2 energy of any kind to use Mr. Sinister on your opponent's first turn. And that, although you're not going first, it does give you a clean bag. So you're able to purchase and prep a Master Mold, and even still keep a sidekick in the field if you wanted to.
Right. That's pretty straightforward. So that really is 2-turn theory rather than the usual 3-turn theory, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. Okay, so you've got your master mold, and you hope to roll him. What happens if you don't roll him? Maybe that's an interesting question.
For sure, and I think that's really, when that happens, that shows the power of Mr. Sinister. It's such a terrific card in this meta because you get this giant character, you want to be rolling him every turn, you want to be pushing him through for damage. If you do happen to miss it, you have a whole bunch of energy left over that you can just start plowing into Mr. Sinister activations to cycle through your bag. And it's not hard in that case to make sure that you're rolling Master Mold on the very next turn. So you have a pretty good chance of rolling it on every turn, which is kind of insane. But if you wanted to look into purchasing something, I think the first purchase that I would always go to after Master Mold is Villainous Pact. Even if I don't have anything in the field, I want to get a Villainous Pact in rotation because it's part of the win condition. And once you have 1 Master Mold die, 1 Villainous Pact die, you really don't need to buy much else on this team unless something starts to go wrong.
Yep. And the two generic energy is handy for Mr. Sinister, so it's all it's all horribly good.
Yeah.
Okay, so if something starts to go wrong, so what kind of things do you not want to see across the board, or what might give you a bit of trouble?
So Barry teams are still very scary. I know we didn't see a lot during the World Championships, but it is still a terrifying card. And one of the downsides of this particular build is that you do give your opponent all of the globals that they need to do exactly what you're doing. So the goal here is that you as the Master Mold player are the beatdown team, and you're playing aggressive in every matchup, no matter what. But you do leave yourself a little susceptible to other players with aggressive teams themselves. So in the Barry matchup in particular, I think that's where shifting immediately to a Mr. Mind purchase before you invest in a Villainous Pact is a good way to go. And then using some of your energy to force attack as many of their sidekicks out of the field as you can, just to make sure that their field doesn't get too big. Because once it gets big enough, there's very little that you can do. Once it gets big enough that it starts being able to KO your tokens, you start to really slow down, and you lose a lot of your past efficiencies that were gained in the first couple turns of building up those tokens.
Okay, so Barry's a possible issue, but you've thought it through and you have an answer to it. Is there anything else that puts a spanner in the works, so to speak?
Yeah, strangely, I think the mirror match is particularly difficult. We saw a lot of that over the U.S. Championships and the World Championships. A lot of people playing Master Mold, and I think that's where Deken really shines as well, as being a very difficult thing for your opponent to answer if they're not prepared for it. So as Master Mold, you want to be building up these tokens and pushing through for a ton of damage, but only being able to do 7 damage a turn takes winning in 1 turn and spreading it out even into needing to win over 3 different turns, which can be a very big difference in the speed of this particular meta. So Deken is really useful in that. What really becomes a challenge and where things start to get a little crazy is when you're playing more of an exact mirror match where the opponent has both Master Mold and a Deken. In that case, you're kind of screwed. It's a very difficult matchup, and it becomes more of a chess match than opposed to something more tactical where you're buying something in particular.
So with the D10 maths, I was a little curious in US Nats. There was a board state in which there were hundreds of tokens across the board. What is the play there? If you have an excess of tokens, presumably, as naive that I am, I would send some of them through. But do you have to hold back? I'm not quite sure how it works out.
So the difficult thing, I think, especially if you're not used to playing against a Ken, it really introduces some complicated attack step math. So if you have, I don't know, let's say a random number, 10 5/5 tokens in the field, and your opponent has 5, you want to make sure that you're able to do 7 damage. So you're going to have to attack with at least 7 tokens, because I'll be able to block 5 of them. And if you attack with 7 tokens, I'm not going to block anything. I'm going to let them all through because I can only take a maximum of 7 damage anyway. So all of a sudden your board state goes from having 10 tokens to having 3. And you were able to do that 10 damage. So you really deplete your board state if you're trying to push through. So you really need to have Villainous Pact as a way of guaranteeing that you can push that damage through without expending too many of your resources and overextending your board state. So it introduces some very complicated attack steps.
That answers the question that I had. Yeah, that makes total sense. Okay, so Barry and mirror match aside, any other speed bumps that you experienced or that you don't really want to see?
No, those are the big things. Those are the big things for sure. There are a couple of cards for sure that can be annoying. Nefarious Broadcast is one that comes to mind for sure. Mm-hmm. It's not a hard counter by any means, but it is rather annoying since you want to be using a lot of your energy to churn your bag with Mr. Sinister. If they have a Nefarious Broadcast coming, you're kind of put in a difficult situation where, do you save that energy with the hopes of using Mr. Sinister on your opponent's turn a whole bunch of times, but potentially having all of it be wasted if they roll Nefarious Broadcast? Or do you buy something that you don't really need because you're focusing on turning your bag just to make sure that you can get some value out of that energy? So it causes some complicated questions, but I would put that in the category of more annoying than anything else. But I think one of the biggest things that I always hated to see on the opposite side of the board was mutation. It's one of the few ways that you can interact with the opponent's used pile in Modern right now, and it is a very interesting way of trying to get around the Deken problem. So your opponent would be able to use Deken, probably take one of your tokens out of the field, which would kill it, and swap in your Deken. And strangely, that's not something that you want. You want him to stay in the used pile, and then they're able to kind of push through with a lot of damage, and there's really nothing you can do at that point.
So the normal stuff, like the normal stuff that we might be talking about in this segment, like Typhoid Mary or Drax or something like that, or the one which was almost seen as a sort of counter to Master Mold, except it's probably not, which was Poison Ivy, the 3 cost. I think that was the rare. Who fields tokens when you attack with the named character, and it was ruled that you could name one of the Sentinel tokens.
Yeah.
None of those, they're all a bit of a non-issue in the end, aren't they? Because you just force attack them, presumably.
Yeah, Poison Ivy, I think the play against her is to just not attack with the tokens until you're ready to win. So you can keep attacking with Master Mold, and you can keep racking up a bunch of tokens. You wait to get your Villainous Pact, and then when you do swing with Villainous Pact, it doesn't really matter how many plant tokens that they get, because you're going to deal 40 damage and win. So Typhoid Mary is a little bit of a more interesting question, actually. It's one that I overlooked initially because it is so hard to keep control pieces in the field right now with all of the force attack globals. But if you use it offensively instead of defensively to shut down your opponent's Deken, as an example, by blanking it, then it can actually be quite strong. So that is one, when we get to the question of things to potentially change, I think that is a very reasonable potential swap-in card on this particular team for one of those flex spots.
So a well-timed Typhoid Mary or a mutation can get around the Deken lock, but then you have to have lethal yourself, which means that you're probably having to play Master Mold or Barry yourself, presumably.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Anything else before we move on to revisions to the team?
No, happy to go into that.
Okay, so this is the team once more as it stands. What would you do differently if you had your time again, if anything?
Yeah, so a lot of it depends on what I would expect to see in the meta. I think that one of the good things about this team is it does have 3 solid flex spots. The Deken spot, Starro, and Mr. Mind can easily be swapped out for whatever you think you may be facing. I think I would more than likely keep Deken there no matter what. Right now in the particular meta, it's just extremely strong, especially in the mirror match. So I think that would stay. I think Typhoid Mary would be one that I would probably swap in if I was to do this again. I'd probably swap out Starro for Typhoid Mary as a potential way of dealing with my opponent's Deken in the mirror match. But there are some other things to consider for sure. The rare Tombstone is a good option, especially if you're thinking that you may be running into a lot of Wonder Woman. So if in the new meta, when the Distraction Global comes back, if we see more Wonder Woman, Tombstone is a good answer to that. Because otherwise, Wonder Woman can really slow down your Master Mold team by shutting down 2 of the 3 token activations that it would normally get. And also has a nice kind of secondary effect of preventing your opponent from fielding 2-cost characters, which potentially may be relevant. That's Tombstone, yeah. And the other one, if Mary Shazam becomes more of an issue, when Force Blocks come back, putting in Kang for the Kang Global is also something that you could easily do as well. But without knowing what the exact meta would be, I think Typhoid Mary would be one of the prime contenders that I'd be looking to swap in. And I'm not really willing to give up on Barry Allen being a threat yet. So I think I would probably keep Mr. Mind on there because otherwise the Barry Allen matchup can be quite challenging.
Yep. Okay. So, yeah, that was a good team. And the changes that you would make would be changes in response to a changing meta, or anticipating that the meta changing, basically. But maybe just that. I'll just get up Typhoid Mary just for. But Typhoid Mary, as you say, not used perhaps in the traditional way of locking something out, but just on the turn when you want to push a load of damage just to get rid of Deken, or not get rid of it, but because it blanks the card rather than the die, which wouldn't be targetable.
Yeah.
Right.
And
well,
strangely not difficult to do either with Mr. Sinister making your bag so thin and churn so fast. It's not outrageous to be able to line up the Typhoid Mary and a Villainous Pact on the same turn. So making sure that you're able to do that with Mr. Sinister is quite easy.
Frighteningly easy, isn't it? I think Mr. Sinister has quite a lot to answer for. And I think the question is not that we're into the banning game, but I'm curious to know, and I plan to do some investigations, but is Mr. Sinister or Master Mold, God, those are hard words to say, which one is more responsible, or is it just the fact that they both exist together in the meta?
Oh, yeah, hard to say. I think, Mr. Sinister, it definitely is the great enabler for most of the big modern win conditions right now, which happen to be more on the expensive side of things.
Yeah.
And I think you folks talked about this on your podcast recently, but the fact that it's 2 generic energy, I think, is really what makes it so strong. It's so easy to save the amount of energy you need to do it on your opponent's first turn, which is really what sets up a lot of these quick games. If it was a different energy combination or even one generic with one other energy, I think it would really reduce its power quite substantially. But I think I wouldn't necessarily ban anything until we see what the new meta brings with Secret Wars. Even at the time of filming this, there have been some spoilers with the Distraction Global coming back, which I think will make a big impact on preventing aggressive teams, but also perhaps enabling some control teams from being successful. And the other one being the Force Block Global that's on, I think, the Invisible Woman. Already, just with that alone, I could see the uncommon Deathbird with a Force Block being an enormous problem for a Master Mold token by kind of forcing a bunch of tokens to block, KOing them with Deadly, and you're taking a bunch of damage and reducing the Master Mold player's field all in a pretty energy non-intensive way. Seems like that would be pretty scary and strong. So I think there are some things coming up that will help to reduce the power of Master Mold a little bit, and we'll see what the meta looks like at that time.
Indeed, we will. Right. Well, Dana, I think you did magnificently. You piloted a very, very well constructed team to a huge amount of success, and I salute you. And
thank you, sir.
And you managed to do all of that while still being thoroughly pleasant and nice and just a good guy. And I don't know too many people who managed to combine that those two things. So well done.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for your time in coming to talk about this. We hope that has been useful to people watching at home. Please do let us know in the comments if you have any questions, and please don't forget to watch the other Chronicles videos. And there's some gameplay of Dana beating me horribly with Master Mold. And yeah, do go and listen to the podcast as well, in which we interview Dana about other stuff, like, yes, the team, but also in the broader context of the championships which just took place. Thank you very much, Dana. Thank you very much at home for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.